we get the most pushback, and I expected it the least. People on Reddit kind of hate us anyway, but we actually got a lot more positive, like, oh, cool, you guys are trying something different. You're trying something apart from React. That's really exciting versus just like our status quo.
Hi, and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. I'm Noel, and today we have Brooks Lybrand, Developer Relations Manager at Remix and React Router, here to talk about React Router 7. In this episode, Brooks and I talk about the history of Remix and React Router and their relationship, and also managing a community and feedback through these big project migrations. So here's our episode with Brooks Lybrand. Hello and welcome to PodRocket. Today we have Brooks Lybrand, Developer Relations Manager for Remix and React Router. He's here to talk about React Router v7, kind of everything that's going on there, the migration, the community. We're hoping to kind of dig into stuff and tear this apart a little bit. So we're gonna jump right in. I guess to start off with, can we kind of set the scene a little bit on why there's been a little bit of a community shift on React Router and some of the dialogue that's going on there?
Sure, yeah. How far do you want me to go back? There's quite a history with this project for sure.
I think I don't know, folks on the last couple, it's kind of tricky because the transition to 7 has been a little bit kind of long, I think, but I don't know, maybe
Sure.
what's been going on in the last 6 months, maybe.
We can start with the happy place of we got React Router 7 over the line. And so the preface of that is we basically, what we were doing with Remix, what we were building with a React framework that had, server-side rendering was kind of the default and was built on web standards. And we added all sorts of other features to that. We got, that was always built on top of React Router. React Router was always the underlying router system. So it was React, then React Router, and then Remix was built on top of that. Those things got so close to being just the exact same thing that we just figured it was kind of better to put everything back into React Router. We also thought that would be good for the community because that would give this framework mode to anyone using React Router if they ever wanted to add it. And then it also kind of freed us up to do something a little bit different with Remix. And that was kind of the piece we couldn't really talk about as much 6 months ago. We already knew that us putting everything in Remix back into React Router was going to be kind of enough for people to digest and to just try and move forward with. That we kind of wanted to wait to be able to talk a little bit more about the future. We also wanted to figure out exactly what we wanted to say before we got to that point. And so that's kind of where we're at now, where we recently announced our plans with Remix v3. It's a departure from React. It's going to be much, much more like full framework in the way that maybe the Laravel and the Rails people mean the word framework versus what we mean in the React community as a framework being more this meta framework, and it's basically React with extra enhancements.
Especially for people that aren't super in the kind of React headspace, it can be a little bit confusing, especially when there's this world where it's am I still just assuming that I'm reaching for Next? What's its relationship with Router now? How does that work with the kind of the Remix migration into this thing? Can you kind of paint that picture a little bit for us?
The way that we want to think about it is basically with React Router, that's a 10-year-old, I think 11-year-old project at this point. So that is very much our React solution. Our team is going to continue developing it. We've shifted our governance around it. So we have an open governance model now instead of just Michael and Ryan, our founders, leading everything. So instead we have more of a voting system, more of a proposal system that kind of matches TC39 or is heavily inspired by it. Because we want it to continue, to develop. React Router has been a great hey, I just need a simple, declarative router for React for my spa. It's really great for that. But maybe you want to build your own framework and you don't want to reinvent the routing piece. We have data mode and it's really great for that too. Or maybe you are hey, I want something like a Next.js or an Astro, or maybe Astro is not a good example. I want something like Next.js or TanStack Router or whatever. React Router has a framework mode and it's really great for that too. In my opinion, it's the best, but I'm also super, super biased. But all of these are great. And so it very much fits into that space. And we have lots of features we're continuing to add, like React Server component support and middleware, all those sorts of things. So that's very much the React Router story. So if you are in React world, you really like React, you like what the React team is doing, we've got a great solution for you that we'll continue developing. And then on the other side, you have Remix, which is more so, what if we actually did build a JavaScript framework, maybe like a Rails or a Laravel, just from soup to nuts, like from end to end, from your data layer all the way up to like your actual component library. What would that look like? And that's really kind of where Remix is heading. And I wish I could say a lot more than that, but honestly, we are like actively developing it. Right now, Remix is more a spec on a Google Doc than it is anything. But it's something that Ryan and Michael and even the whole team has been building pieces of for years and years and years, separate and together. And so the challenge we have now is not so much coming up with ideas, but rather just taking things we've built over and over again and putting it all into one cohesive thing.
On this React router piece, you're probably as good a person to speak to this as any. You talked about the different modes here. When using those different like setups, does it feel like, or do they feel pretty independent? Like if you're doing, one or the other, does it still feel like you're using React router, or is it kind of like each is it's such a separate mental concept that they're almost entirely different in how you interact with them as a developer?
That's actually a really great question, and it's definitely more the first thing that you said. We have a diagram. I don't think we published it, but we're going to try and include this at some point, where it's more. It's not so much Venn diagrams, but more concentric circles. So at your root layer, you have your like your declarative mode, your SPA router, and it doesn't really care about data. It doesn't really care about server-side rendering. If you want to do that, you go set it up yourself. And that is like the very core of it. It's like your link component, your nav link component. It's got like these routes components as well. And so that is kind of the crux of it. And you're going to be using those pieces pretty much with everything. And then you have the next layer, which is the data mode. And so it uses all those same things, except your actual setup for the router is a data router instead of like a browser router, instead of these route components. And the reason we do that is because your router is now responsible, or can be responsible, for your loaders and your actions and what happens when a user hits a page for the first time. What kind of data do you load? If the user submits a form, what do you do? What do you send off as a mutation, and what actually should be updating on the page? And so it's the same exact components as you had before, but added functionality and added components. And then framework mode is basically if you took data mode, but then you made a V plugin for it so that everything is kind of set up cohesively. You have like these route modules, and you have these special exports that automatically map into things. There's a lot less fiddling around and setting up all those different things. You can just export function loader, and it automatically works, and it's automatically code split the way you'd want. It automatically runs just on the server instead of on the client. And so that's really the concentric circles. They all feel very much the same. You're just getting more and more powers as you go, basically.
It sounds like you kind of had different use cases in mind than like like letting users plug in at the various depths here of the concentric circle. If we'll continue that kind of analogy or that framework, is there like who did you picture when you were kind of setting up the abstractions for data mode? Like who is that kind of middle tier really for? Because I think both of the outside edges make sense. I'm curious about the middle one. Yeah.
So the origin of how it came about is basically because of how we developed Remix. So as I understand it, I wasn't on the team when they started, but this is the story as I've gathered it, is when they built Remix, they more or less forked React Router and just kind of took all the pieces they wanted and built Remix. But then they realized like, actually, we've made some really useful things. We basically have made we've made a toolkit for building your own framework. So we should actually put that back into React Router and then just rebuild Remix on top of it. So this kind of started that journey to where the Remix project and the React Router project started getting closer and closer. So first it was built for them. It was actually built for our developers. That was the intended audience. And so then for anyone else who is like, hey, I like Remix, I like what they're doing, but honestly, they made some decisions that I maybe don't like, or I want to add features that they're not adding. I want to build my own framework. But I don't want to reinvent the whole data layer piece, because the data layer is really simple. It's just saying when you're at a route, what do you load? What does your GET request do? And then what do your post, put, delete, all the other requests do? And that's pretty much it. And nested routing, I guess you get that for free as well. And so that's really who data mode is for. It's really for that middle piece. It was also meant as a bridge because initially we wanted to encourage adoption from React Router to Remix. That definitely was a goal early on. Less so a goal now. We kind of just want people to use whatever they want. So it's definitely made as a bridge. If you are trying to move to the framework mode now, it definitely acts as a bridge to get there if that works for you and that's in line with your goals.
I'm sure people who are down in the weeds can like Google this and look this up. But what is the kind of migration path now as these like like people from Remix, people from old versions of Router? Like, is there specific modes that those are typically targeting, or like where are you guys pushing?
If you actually actively are trying to do a migration, we do have migration docs on our website for all these different entry points. So please do reference those. And if they suck, reach out to me because I wrote them. So I just have more work to do is all that means. It's a really good question. We're not trying to necessarily push anyone to use any different mode. We actually think all modes are legitimate, but we do want people to be aware of the different modes. So we have like a one pager that explains, hey, these are all the different modes. This is kind of, if you're trying to build this app, this is probably what you want. If you're trying to build like your own framework, this is probably what you want. If you're just like, hey, just give it all to me, I don't want to like make all these decisions about bundlers and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, you probably want to use framework mode. And so as far as the migration story though, React Router v6 to v7 was like just about non-breaking. It was very, very straightforward upgrade. There were a couple, we have this system called future flags, which a lot of other people have this too. This isn't necessarily just us, but for new and breaking APIs, we would add like a future flag, and then you turn that on in v6 to be able to get the new feature. We have a page on I think the v6 docs and potentially the v7 of everything that needs to be updated. It's pretty simple for a React Router v6 app. So you just turn all those on, and then you can update your dependencies to v7, and then turn all those off, and now you are on version 7. Now, if you want to move to framework mode, that's a little bit of a different story, but we have like a migration guide all about what it looks like. If you're already using loaders and actions, that's pretty easy. You just rewrite your routes to look like route modules, and then you're really close to framework mode already. So it's really just going to be shifting to that V plugin. If you're using our declarative routing, just like those routes components, that middle layer, you can pretty much mount it as a route. I'm pretty sure is what we recommend. You just one route in your framework, you mount that as your like little spa router, and then you just migrate over routes one by one as you want to. Then if you're coming from Remix v2, see, we made this really complicated. We're trying to simplify this. If you're coming from Remix v2, that's actually one of the easiest paths because it looks so similar. The framework mode for v7 is the same as the framework mode for v2. It just has more features, and we also similarly had future flags. The biggest challenge is like all your imports change, right? They go from Remix to React Router, but we have a code mod that I have not heard complaints yet. So if people find issues where it doesn't do what they want, please let us know. But I've seen huge code bases just like that, just all get converted, all get updated to the correct imports.
You mentioned having seen huge code bases there. I'm curious. Again, I'm not completely sure on the timeline or where you were involved here, but just kind of to your knowledge, was there like? I guess I feel like we kind of have been in this era where there's been a lot of frameworks, tools like this have gone through these like rather large migrations, like in general, like Next, React, Vue, like we've all gone through just these like large things over the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. Is there like, I guess, did you guys have any fear with kind of where Remix was coming from? Like, I don't want to say it's kind of like a incumbent or anything, but just these like this kind of the place it was in, and trying to get people to migrate while also shifting to something that isn't just like the kind of the typical React flow. Was there any kind of concern that there'd be like a fracturing here that may be kind of tricky to wrangle?
I think it actually ties into like a really good reason why we did the whole Remix to React Router instead of React Router to Remix thing. So back in last May, so like a year ago from when we're talking now, is when we announced that we were going this direction. That was like the first level of the announcement. What precipitated that was basically Michael and Ryan showing us what they wanted Remix v3 to be at the time. At the time, it actually looked very different than what we're talking about now. It was basically, we were codenaming it Reverb. So if anyone has heard of that, that's what it is. And the idea was it was very React Server component forward. It was very much like Next.js app router built React Server components first. Definitely some different things than what they were doing. We had a lot of really cool ideas. We're going to rebuild the router. It's going to be incredibly type safe, not just like type gen, but type safe. And so we built this really cool system. We had prototypes of aspects of it at least working. And it was really exciting. We thought it was super cool, but the reality is like, our team looked at it. Our team was looking at it, and some folks at Shopify as well got a preview of it. And we basically were just like, this is cool, but this is so different. Like, this is an Angular 2 moment. People joke about us having one now, but it was like that straight up would have been just a completely different project. And we're like, I don't know how we can go from Remix V2 to V3, we always talk about upgrade paths. There's no upgrade path here.
Yeah.
This is a completely different thing. So that's when we actually had the idea. I think it was, I think multiple is like very much convergent evolution. Multiple people on the team kind of had this idea at different points where we said like, actually what we have now is way closer to React Router. Why don't we just pull it into React Router? And so that was the initiation of that idea. Then we worked to have like a working example of the RSC demo, because that was really important way back a year ago. Development moves a lot slower than I'd like it to. And so that's when we announced what we were doing with merging Remix into React Router and giving what we had done with Remix a home in the React Router space. Then we launched it last October, V7, that's when that came out. And since then we've been developing it, adding new features, cleaning up things that were kind of broken. And now we're ready to start telling the rest of the story.
I mentioned earlier that there's kind of some divisiveness here. I think, vocal people will be vocal people forever, and you'll always hear about the people that are having problems or have strong opinions. Did you guys kind of anticipate some of this backlash a little bit? I guess, would you agree that there's been a little bit of like kind of divisiveness in the community, and was that something you anticipated?
Honestly, it was reversed from what I expected, which there's probably a lesson in that. So with the remix to React Router one, we got the most pushback, and I expected it the least. With this one, we expected people to be like, "Oh, they're doing it again," and we definitely have gotten that. But it's very much like it's like Reddit, which already like people on Reddit kind of hate us anyway. I definitely want to take their feedback, but I take it with a large grain of salt. But we actually got a lot more positive, like, "Oh, cool, you guys are trying something different. You're trying something apart from React. That's really exciting." Versus just like our status quo, which has been trying to work with React and then like maybe getting frustrated, complaining, and feeling like we're being blocked from something we want to do. So I think people have actually got that story. But how we dealt with that feedback, it honestly, it's kind of two pieces. One, it's if people are upset, obviously you kind of have to try and filter the signal from the noise. Personally, I try to, whenever we're getting a lot of negative feedback, I just try to turn off all social media, just give myself a little bit of a break from it, let it all sit, and then kind of come back with a fresh perspective, and that allows me, at least personally, to hear that signal from that noise. But yeah, the fact that people are still a little bit confused about our whole story just means we're not doing a good job making the story clear in our own like materials. Like our website should just make the story really clear. We shouldn't have to link people to a tweet. People shouldn't have to listen. I want them to listen to this podcast, but they shouldn't have to go listen to this podcast to understand what we're doing. So that's definitely a failure of communication. I think there's also, though, a reality of like our organization, our team of 8, the way we feel is in the way that we're communicating is going to leak out to the broader just narrative and the broader community. So we've never been in like huge conflict, but I don't think we were 100% aligned on what we were doing with our projects. And I think that kind of showed. I think people could feel that tension of like, where's React Router going? Where's Remix going? About a month ago, this is when we started. Well, we've been talking for a while, but that's when we really solidified, okay, we're going to move React Router to an open governance model. And we're going to let these 5 developers on the team be the ones to start as the steering committee, and we may invite others from the community into it. And then Ryan and Michael, the founders, are going to start the process of building what they want Remix to be, and then bring us in as they're excited about specific features that they think different ones of us can help. So it allows us as one team to continue pursuing both of these projects in a way that everybody actually feels really excited about and really energetic about. And I think that's already started to show our cohesion, our unity on that has already started to show, I think, in the community, that the community is excited about both these initiatives. So that's my perspective so far, but keep watching people's feedback, of course.
I mentioned some other projects, and there have been a bunch of large projects that have gone through like similar kind of big, paradigm shifts. But I do think that your guys' situation is unique in that there was kind of like a layer shift, or like there was a tier swap, and then you also like changed the thing beneath it out like in short succession. Not that there's anything wrong, but like I think
you're right.
that is confusing for users, and I'm sure that was like kind of was super tricky for you guys too. Like like kind of figuring out how to navigate that. So I don't envy that position.
That's totally fair.
When you guys set out, like did you like this is kind of what led to my prior question of like you had to anticipate this being like a tricky thing to like get people. I guess I think the difficulty here is just like the data is not all yours like when you have
Yeah.
one of these projects, there's stuff in like Stack Overflow and Reddit
Yeah.
comments, and like all this stuff just isn't gonna be updated anymore.
Yeah,
Like, how
exactly.
did you like? Were you guys kind of looking at that, and was there like a little bit of anxiety? What was that temperature like?
I mean, and the biggest problem we're still going to have going forward is like Remix V2 and Remix V3 will be completely different things. So much so that
Mhm.
most people are saying like, you really should name it a new project, and I
Yeah,
definitely respect that. Honestly, if I were doing it, I probably would, but I'm not in charge, and so I'm
yeah,
going to
yeah.
go with what what the people in charge want, and I'm going to be happy with it. Plus, I
Mhm.
just launched a store that sells Remix merch, so
Yeah.
we're gonna keep that
Remix's
going. That
branding
always
has
makes
always
sense to
been
me.
really good. I get it. Like it's
Yeah,
I understand.
exactly. And
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
there's kind of this funny thing though, like it is really legitimate. And there's also this weird thing where like with the advent of AI and LLMs and all that training, it's almost like exacerbated that
Ah,
problem of like old
totally.
stuff. And I
Yeah.
feel like for me, at least personally, it's almost pushed me over the edge to where it's like, okay, I can either worry about that forever and we can never innovate,
Mhm.
or we can just say like, yep, that's what it is. And how do we work with these things? How do we provide people tools? How do we communicate our best to people? Because if we're communicating well to people, we're communicating well to the LLMs
Yeah.
because they actually will read your stuff, which is what's nice. So,
Yeah, that's
for
true. Yeah,
example,
yeah.
I this
Yeah.
past week, actually no, wait, sorry, this week, I just wrote up some like cursor rules, and I used Cursor to write it for me,
Mhm.
honestly.
Yeah.
That helps you, like if you are starting a React Router V7 project. Let me step back actually. If you're starting a React Router V7 project and you just try to like one shot vibe code something like, hey, make me a contacts page with like an edit form for different contexts and an omnipresent list on the side of all the contacts, it will try and pull in remix, all the remix packages. It will try and
Mhm.
pull in React Router DOM, which like still exists, but you don't need to use that package.
Yeah.
It's not gonna go to V8 because it's just a mirror of V7.
Mhm.
So it'll do all these things that are completely wrong, but
Mhm.
with like a few hundred line cursor rule that I'm pretty sure I can condense even more. It can completely one shot that and do all the type gen stuff and do like some of the latest stuff that is like the model has not been trained on. I did this with
Yeah.
actually like Claude. No, wait, which one was it? I think it was 3.5. I did it
Mhm.
with an older
Gotcha.
model basically that
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure has not been trained on the newest stuff, and it
Mhm.
it gets it. You just tell it what you want and it'll do it. So I feel very confident that like we have to figure out how to keep innovating. We have to figure out how to do things better. If we're just gonna let like the
Yeah.
reality of Stack Overflow and like what does Chat GPT know
Mhm.
dictate what we can do, then like what are we doing? We're not engineering. We're not trying new things.
Yeah.
We're just being stuck and letting computers tell us what we can and can't do.
I hadn't spent much time chewing on the, like, what is in the context of a model's, like, understanding for when updating these things, and I don't know if that's a future I wanna be in, where every time there's an API
Absolutely.
change of some kind, it's like, "Oh, we've gotta make sure that when prompted, the models all spit out
Yeah,
the right thing
exactly.
now," huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, at least with Stack Overflow, you can go in and edit and cross out and slap a link on them. Like,
Yeah, you
you
have a
did
little more control. These
yeah,
these things
yeah,
are unfortunately pretty closed boxes that other people are doing. But we've run into this before.
yeah.
SEO was a version of this. This is just a much more it just I don't know, overreaching and fast spreading kind of thing that we're dealing with. So we're all
Yeah.
learning in it. But if we stop innovating, we stop trying new things, I feel like that's how we lose in open source.
This is a complete aside, not where I anticipated this conversation going, but I've also found that this problem kind of exists in that, like, there is an increasing number of, like, dev work and support requests and stuff being shifted to these,
Mm.
like, walled gardens. Like,
Mhm.
Discord is the first one that comes to mind. Like, there's so much stuff happening in Discord, and it's
Yeah.
hard to extract. And I think maybe this is a like there's this actually is kind of a counterpoint to this problem, and then I feel like that stuff isn't like exposed online anywhere. So people tend not to get outdated information because they just go and ask the same question a million times in like
Yeah. Oh
Discord servers
man.
and stuff.
You're
Um,
absolutely right. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Have you guys do you guys have like any support channels like that where you've kind of had this like ongoing discussion, or are you using kind of the more open source standard like Git?
No, yeah, you're correct. We have a Discord. I really love our Discord because it is so active, but it absolutely that is the heel to it that I absolutely hate is that there's so much good information that doesn't get out there. But also there's
Mhm.
a lot of like Discord because it's so rapid and with humans, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah.
It is very much like information gets outdated very quickly. So there's a
Mhm.
weird thing to where it's nice that it can correct people in the moment.
Yeah.
And so it's just an interesting thing. Even like Twitter with how, or now it's X, how it's
Yeah.
all gotten so locked down, it is not a good source of information either because you have to have a super extensive API and scrape it if you're not logged in and all those sorts of things. So
Yeah.
it's there's pros and cons for sure. I don't love it though. I personally would like to get more of the good findings that come from our Discord and even Twitter back into our communication. I think we over-index on like small wins. You get one person to understand what you're saying and you feel good about that.
Right.
Then it's really easy to forget, oh, there's probably like a few hundred or a few thousand other people who have that person's exact same problem. And if we don't have a ready, searchable, indexable, trainable version of whatever we just explained, that's kind of a miss on our part where we should just turn that into an artifact.
I think that's a problem across the board. And like, it's a bummer that isn't, I think the thing I'm lamenting here is that like historically by default, the artifact was there because it's like, oh, there's like, it was like a GitHub issue or it was in Stack Overflow or whatever, right? So like the question was just there and in some old forum for PHP developers, right? It's like you could find it all. And now it's like, oh, it's not happening. And the immediacy of those platforms the immediacy of the new platforms is like really nice. And again, like it tends not to be as outdated because it is immediate. But like having that manual triage step that we're putting on already busy maintainers, we're like, what are the questions that are commonly being asked? Like, is this truly a one-off question that this person's in a unique situation, or is this the one of, and there's 1,000 of these people that only, there's only one of them jumping in? Is a tricky problem.
It is a tricky problem. Yeah, I don't have a solution, but it can definitely resonate.
I'm optimistic that like somebody will figure this out. I think it's tricky because like Discord's TOS is pretty like locked down and stuff like that. But I think that there's probably a world, and I think there was even a couple products that did this where it was like they're like Discord likes, but they're like fully like everything can be open, and there's like GDPR implications and all that stuff there. But it's an interesting one. I guess I have you found that there is much kind of difference in the tone of those conversations and questions and complaints in like your guys' Discord versus like what's happening on GitHub versus what's happening on Reddit?
I don't know if I want to categorize every single one because they all definitely have different flavors, but it's true. So our Discord is typically pretty friendly. There's certainly people get, frustrated or upset or whatever. I get it. People are trying to do their job and we're the thing blocking them in that moment. Discord, we have some amazing moderators and even just unofficial mods really who just answer questions very quickly. So there is that nice reality of Discord has that kind of fast pacedness. GitHub, we encourage all questions to just go to discussions. That's been a great feature of GitHub recently. And honestly, that really does help with the stuff is searchable, it's indexable, it's trainable, etc. And so we push people to the discussions so that we don't litter issues with what are just questions, not actual like this is a bug. That's really what we want issues to be, or maybe a feature enhancement. Even those actually are supposed to be discussions. Feature enhancements should first be a discussion. So that certainly helps as well. And we have pretty good responsiveness there. Twitter, it's different. People want to be spicy. People want to get retweeted. So there's a little bit more maybe the egging on. Reddit, our team really just doesn't engage with. I would like to more, but I don't know. Most people don't seem to have much good faith in us. Pretty much no matter what is launched. Like there's one YouTuber who's not on our team, Alum, who loves making YouTube videos about what we do, is really excited about it. He also works in the open source space. He built the React Router dev tools. He'll post like videos on Reddit just about something he's excited about. Like, hey, middleware's out. And the first comment is always, oh, I bet they broke the API again. And it's just like not even wanting to engage. This guy's not even on the team. He's just excited. And it's just like, I get it. I get it if you've been burned before by open source. But like, hey, that was 6 years ago that Michael Ryan broke that API on you. Like, you don't even use this project. Maybe just let this guy like share what he's excited about. And if you want to go a step further, maybe watch it first and then you can comment. So
it's like the Twitter thing, but maybe worse, maybe better.
I don't know. And
Reddit is a weird place. Like
Reddit is a very weird place.
I love Reddit.
That's great if people like it. It's for us. It adds more stress and anxiety to my life than needed, and it doesn't help me do a better job. I already get the feedback that Reddit gives in a much more constructive way through our Discord and through GitHub, and even sometimes through Twitter and Blue Sky.
I love Blue Sky. I feel like Blue Sky still like is great, but I've found the people that have migrated to Blue Sky, everyone's like very good faith. Like Blue Sky, everyone's very happy about everything. There's always
there's a lot more positivity right now.
It's just like I don't know. People seem to go to Blue Sky when they don't want to be being pulled pulled through garbage and stuff. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, this is nice. I guess this kind of brings up an interesting point in that a lot of these decisions, I think the original justification for a lot of routing decisions, and especially like how that interfaced with large teams and they were working on large front end projects wherein people would typically reach for a routing tool to help them, was
Mhm.
kind of in like inter-team dynamics, right? Like the community, like how do
Mm.
people decide how we break up pieces of our app? How does data move between those pieces? And I think a lot of that factors into like, what do we want out of a router? Like
Yeah.
how does data flow through the app? Um, can you speak a little bit to kind of how that factored into your guys's, or to the decision? I know like you were not involved in all of it, but to the
Mhm.
decision to kind of do this migration and the new mode in which data should flow kind of through router?
I really wish I had like more context on the whole history of React Router, because this isn't really the first time they kind of allowed React Router to care about your data. I started doing React and really web development in like 2016, 2017. I think React Router had moved to like V4, and so it was very much the declarative routing
Mhm.
routes were like written via JSX, and so there wasn't like this way to hook in.
Yeah.
So I kind of got that post experience. So the reason though, from talking to Michael and Ryan, the reason they went with that with like version 4 was because React was promising a data solution for a really, really long time. It was
Mhm.
promising a solution to handle your data. So then they felt like, okay, we don't need to worry about that. The router doesn't need to worry about these things. Um, fast forward like 3 or 4 years, we learn about RSC and we get the first RFC for React Server Components.
Yeah.
And then fast forward another 4 or 5 years, and here we are, and they exist, and we have like a preview of them. We'll continue developing what we think is the best version of React Server Components, but it hasn't been exactly what we wanted it to be.
Mhm.
But even going back, we basically, Ryan and Michael were kind of done waiting for React to have a solution. And like you just said, it's the router is actually a really great place to do all that coordination of data. If you think about a traditional, multi-page app and MPA, that's how it works. You go
Mhm.
to the URL, it requests things, it builds a page for you, and then it gives you that. And then you submit a form, and that's actually just a navigation. It could be a GET, like a search box,
Yep.
or it could be like a post, like you actually like submitted some information, and then it redirects you or refresh the page or whatever it does. And so taking that model of like, this is how the web works, and let's just build it into the SPA experience, the single page app experience, and
Yep.
make those two things feel very similar, but the SPA version just to be an enhanced version of that MPA version. That's really what led them to want to do what Remix was back in 2020, and then build that back into React Router, because they felt like, hey, this is actually a pretty good model, and we really like it. People seem to be resonating with it. Let's build this lower level version of it so people can build their own frameworks with it or use it in their existing React Router apps if that's an easier upgrade for them. So that's a bit of the motivation.
Have you been working with many people who are kind of plugging in at the like data mode layer?
I think one of the bigger apps I can think of off the top of my head would be Linear. That's how they kind of work.
Nice.
So it's a lot of people who yeah, basically trying to think of the exact ones. It's people who already had React Router, and then they wanted all those capabilities, and then Remix was just a bit too far for them, especially because for a while Remix had a closed compiler built on ESBuild.
Mm.
We didn't have the V plugin, so it was much harder to plug in to add
Yeah.
any sort of like post processing and pre processing of different modules or all sorts of stuff. Adding your specific flavor of CSS and JS was much harder back then. In a lot of ways, that made the Remix core simpler, but in a lot of ways, it also made it just a non-starter for teams. Honestly, the previous company I was at was so heavily like reliant on Webpack, there just was no way we were moving to Remix as it was at that time.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a lot of those kind of companies that we kind of see doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up linear. Yeah. Like, would you say it's the case that those more, I don't want to say like app like, but like I don't know what other term to use. Those like
Hmm.
web apps that feel very like appy, like they, the
Yeah.
way data moves through them is kind of maybe non-typical. Like they're very concerned with the UX is maybe it's not a typical web app, right? It's like the way in which you navigate around and
Yep.
filter and like columns and stuff aren't typical. Is that typically where you guys kind of see people reach for data mode?
Yeah, I would definitely agree that is very much it. And even like going a layer lower of that like declarative mode, that's
Yeah.
also what we see. Like take T3 chat, Theo's like
Hmm.
chat it uses Next.js, but it actually uses React Router declarative mode on top of it,
Oh, cool.
which is very interesting just for the fast spa navigations. Because you're absolutely right. If you have that app experience, if you're flipping around in lots of different ways and you have modal popping up and all those sort of things, React Router is really great for that. It's very battle tested. It's been there for years.
Yeah.
And then data mode is exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, we both have the very app-like experience, and we also have very heavy data dependencies, and we want to make sure those are coordinated in one place and not strewn about in all your different components being loaded in various places, and we can't keep track of the network tab and all that kind of stuff. That allows you to push that back there. And then you can go one layer deeper if you want to server-side render certain pages or all of your pages for the initial thing, and then pass it off and just do spa navigations. It makes it really easy to do that, which is great. And then at that point, you've built Remix framework mode or framework mode. So yeah,
I want to flip us to our quick round questions here and dig into some stuff. Is there anything else though you kind of want to touch on, Brooks, before we jump into some rapid fire question?
No, I think
we've been kind of all over the place. It's kind of
this is great. I love
I've been
it.
jumping us around. So
this is good. I don't have anything.
Yeah, no sweat. We'll jump right in. So yeah, these are still like we're kind of when we were going off the old outline before, but I think these are still mostly applicable here. So I'm gonna roll with them. If you had to design routing from scratch for like a new JS framework today or a new setup, like we're integrating it with React directly or something, what non-obvious feature would you prioritize?
Oh, that's so fascinating. I don't know if I can think of a non-obvious one. I think it feels obvious, but like TypeScript support from the ground up feels like a must-have. We're just at that point where TypeScript is expected, so you really need the type safety to be built in.
Yeah. I think it's as good an answer, good of answer as any. And maybe it's like one of those things where you don't want any non-obvious features because people are only gonna use what is obvious. Like
honestly, it's a great point. Yeah, I think like I would say actually like getting the route pattern really like just easy to understand. Like it should just feel like, oh, of course that's what you do, or reading it rather should feel like, oh, of course that's what you do. I think that's important. Don't make like bespoke like your own magic little strings and stuff. Follow conventions where they exist and like make things better where it is a consistent problem you've seen before.
Yeah, no magic is probably a pretty good rule. Yeah, for sure. What do you think routing will look like in 5 years?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's gonna like change too much. I think as more people are using like LLMs and AI and agents and all this stuff to work with the web, I do think we're gonna see a lot more of like of the agent kind of interacting with the web and with the router level. So I think at most we're maybe going to use routers to expose more tools to AI as it's navigating an app for you. We already are seeing this in like the Shopify admin. There's a tool called Sidekick, and it is like a chatbot, but it's more than just like asking it questions and it gives you back answers because it did something. It does a lot of like, for instance, I'm like, oh, I want to set up my domain. I want to connect my domain to the store. It will pull up the link to navigate to the domains directly, and it'll embed like links, and so it knows how to route and it knows what pages and routes have what actions. So I think that we're going to see that a lot more kind of drive how routing works in the next 5 years.
Nice. One of those prior two answers may also be the answer to this question, but if you could convince framework authors of just one thing about routing today, what would it be?
Yeah, definitely what I said, but also I'll step back and say with file-based routing, like you have to have a base layer. You can't just have file-based routing. You have to have like a config underneath that. I've just seen everyone hates file-based routing no matter what. No matter how you design it, you cannot design it perfectly. It is like it's an impossible problem in my opinion. So whatever your system is, it's going to grow to a point where people eventually hate it or are frustrated or it's clunky in some way. So always give people that escape hatch lower down to where they can then define their own routing, or if they need to migrate to a different route, they can separate everything into its own kind of section, and then they can start building new routes in their new way or whatever. But yeah, give people that escape hatch. It's the dangerously set HTML, but for routing essentially.
Yeah. Do you, I guess, is there one routing convention you wish had never existed?
Yeah, Remix V2 actually is like my most frustrating one, because I think it's better than the V1, but I think it wasn't clearly enough better, and it just added churn. We did add backwards compatibility. You could still use the V1, But the fact that we called it V2 routing, just it always is going to imply in people's mind, no matter what you tell them, this is better. And the old one is going to be deprecated someday. You can still use V1 routing even in React Router V7. We really try to have the backwards compatibility as strongly as we can, but it just doesn't matter psychologically. We just still think it's not as good. So I don't think we should have built that. I think we should have made it a separate package and encouraged people to use it if they want, and called it like flat routing or something. But yeah, I really wish that we didn't do that. But that happened before I joined the team, so I can always say that it wanted to happen under my watch.
Yeah, of course. Is there something in particular you think React Router v7 gets right that most frameworks, routing tools maybe don't?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really love our routes convention. Like I think that's been so helpful and such a breath of fresh air. And other solutions definitely do have config base. Like I think TanStack Router added that after they saw our own. So that, off the top of my head, just because we're talking about that, I really like our routes TS for framework mode. I think that's one nice thing that I would love to see. Like Next.js, I would love to see them steal that and add it. I think people would be ecstatic.
Nice, cool. We can kind of end it on a positive note there. Thank you so much for coming online and chatting with me, Brooks. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, all.
Yeah, take it easy.